Hey guys, this is Blueset, and welcome to the news installment of Star Trek Ships of the Line, Star Trek Online Edition. This particular episode will be dealing with the Constellation Class and its new profound effect in Star Trek Online. This particular vessel, the Constellation Class, is an old style vessel. And yes, we have old vessels in the game. We have the Constitution Class, the Starship Class, which is the original series Constitution. And then we have various other starships that are very old that has been phased out by Starfleet. But again, it still has life in Star Trek Online. Apparently, we like old things. So, nostalgics out there, good for you. And also to go have. Now, I'm going to put up a video here of the live commentary I have of a video recording of me talking about the ship in the game and its armaments. So here it is. Currently right now in Star Trek Online, the Constellation Class is actually available. However, as of yet, for me that is, I can only unlock the saucer. However, the saucer nacelles and the hull are available. The hull is actually currently not visible, but it can be unlocked. The nacelles in the game is currently not accurate. As of right now, I have yet to unlock the nacelles, but the nacelles themselves are actually inaccurate. They currently look like exactly what the Constitution class nacelles do. This is actually an oversight of Cryptic. Also note that it is missing the forward hatch for the shuttle bay for the Constellation Class. However, in terms of Star Trek, in a sense of what is actually viable, one could assume that the navigational deflector dish is actually behind here, assumingly in this section here, or somewhere around the vessel itself for the section of the ship. However, if they're going to put a hatch here, they might as well replace this area where the hatch would be and have the navigational deflector dish there, if they're going to want it visible. Otherwise, have the hatch there to be the shuttle bay, as the deflector dish doesn't have to be visible. Also note how most other CGIs miss the actual sensor domes or observation decks that was down here. I cannot zoom in anymore on this. However, I can tell you the armament of this vessel. This does have, of the time era of the Constitution class, 6 twin phaser emitter banks on the saucer, 3 on the ventral, and 3 on the dorsal. Also, too, the Constellation class actually had 4 torpedo tubes that was available to it. 2 on the dorsal and 2 on the ventral. This allowed this vessel to be quite heavily armed, and it was classified as a star cruiser. I will summarize on a few notes of what I just said in the live recording. Yes, it is very much true that you cannot get the actual Constitution parts. However, if for those who actually gone through War is Good for Business, more than likely you have unlocked either the saucer, nacelles, or hull of the Constellation for the heavy cruiser slot. Now, you have to understand, War is Good for Business has been removed from the game, so you cannot get the accolade for it. And yes, it is an accolade, but it is well hidden. This particular hidden accolade is not even part of the accolade listing, so you can't really tell if you got it until you look at the heavy cruiser listings. So again, you have to actually make sure that you did something in there in order to get it. But I will talk more about this later. For now, let's talk about the service of this particular vessel in its line of duty. The history of the Constellation class. The Constellation class became service as of early of 2285, at least one such ship, the USS Hathaway, was constructed by Yoyodian Propulsion Systems at the Copernicus shipyards on Luna. Nearly a decade later, after the launch of the Hathaway, the prototype of the class, the USS Constellation, was still undergoing certification trials. So this means a few things. One, although the Hathaway was constructed with the Constellation typings on it, the actual ship class was going through shakedown runs and qualifications to actually still be in service of Starfleet. Otherwise, it would have been known as a Hathaway type and just left it right there. But of course, this was during the time period of Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country, during the Operation Retrieve chartings. And yes, if you do look around, there is a fourth page that the colonel was flipping through, but that fourth page was never shown. So, yeah, I know, it's kind of weird for not being able to see it. Let's continue on. By the mid-2360s, this class of old-style starcruiser was on the fringe of being phased out of the fleet. Those that had been decommissioned, including the 80-year-old Hathaway, were stripped of their offensive systems and rendered warp inactive, which included the removal of all antimatter. This particular information was actually listed down in the Next Generation's episode Peak Performance. This was during the war game thing, I think. I don't know, I haven't looked at the episode in a long while. Those that remained in service were typically relegated to transport duties. The Constellation Class starships were also used in second-line service, including the hastily organized Federation blockade during the Klingon Civil War, and this was on Next Generation's episode Redemption 2. In 2369, commander of the USS Enterprise D, a Galaxy-class starship, one particular Captain Jean-Luc Picard, regarded his former command, the Constellation Class USS Stargazer, as being an overworked, underpowered vessel that was always on the verge of flying apart at the seams. And of course adding, in every measurable way, my Enterprise is a superior vessel. However, he did admit that there were days when he would have done anything to be back on board the Stargazer. So yes, for those who love their starships on first flight, there you go. And besides, how can you not? Anyways, let's find out. Now, again, weapons layout is still there, but I did not mention about the aft torpedo weapons. The torpedo slots are actually concealed neatly on the pylon structings that goes towards the upper and lower nacelle couplings. So there you go. It has two torpedo launchers, but in any case, I think there would have been one at any point. And speaking of any phaser emitters, if there were going to be any phaser emitters on the aft, they're very much well concealed. If I were to actually put a point about phaser emitters in the aft, it would be probably right around the impulse engines, but that would be quite risky. So, again, it's questionable. Now, if you're going to look at the bridges of the vessel, try to get to any feasible sense of trying to get there, the one thing you have to understand is that the bridges they used for both the Hathaway and the Stargazers were both actually redresses of another redress. For Next Generations, the battle bridge for the Galaxy class was actually literally a redressing of the Constitution class's bridge from the motion picture. So, yeah, they did that. They redressed it and basically repurposed. And they did it again for the USS Hathaway and for the USS Stargazer. So, this means a few things. If you want to go for more of a Stargazer, you're going to want to have something where navigational and I do believe. Let's find out. Helm and navigation, there you go, were actually in the front. But on the Hathaway, the helm and navigations were in the extreme port and starboard sides of the bridge. So, yeah, you can say that for the Stargazer was actually commissioned later and in service longer than the Hathaway, but they maintained the same bridge. The Hathaway, probably, 80-year-old ship, actually had an updated bridge. But again, the bridge wasn't really updated that much. But you can tell that the bridges were updated over the course of, Starfleet updating their systems. Just the Stargazer was the unlucky one to not get updated. And of course, if you really want to know any specs about it, this vessel will not exist and should not exist in Star Trek Online. If you're going to put any lore, quote-unquote lore, aspects of the vessel, NX Class, not going to be there. Oberth, not going to be there. Original Series Constitution, not going to be there. The refitted Constitution, it's questionable to not be there. But it's understandable if it's not available for captains to fly around in the Constitution class in that time era. Besides, you have the Excalibur class and the Vesper class. And you also have the Exeter class as well. So, take what you will. There are other vessels out there, especially for the Constellation class. You still have the let me take a look here so that I don't butcher the name as I'm trying to remember. Cheyenne class? Yeah, you still have the Cheyenne class. Although being phased out, you still have the Cheyenne class. You also have the Prometheus class. Oh, speaking about these vessels, a few variants of the Nebula class as well actually had 4 nacelles. So yes, the Constellation class, Cheyenne class, Prometheus class, and Nebula class variants actually had 4 nacelles. So this is actually by far, of the 4 vessels, the unique combination of nacelles in any starship configuration. Most starships get 2 nacelles, maybe a 3 if they're considered a dreadnought. So there you go. Let's not forget about the actual measurements of the ship, shall we? The actual measurements of this particular starship is actually 310 meters long. And in terms of Constitution class, this vessel is actually 5 meters longer than the actual Constitution refit, if one were to look at it that way. And height-wise, it's actually equivalent to that of the actual Constitution. So, when you actually look at it and side by side, it is actually relative to the sense of nearly as tall, but definitely longer than the actual Constitution. So keep that in mind when you actually want some sort of realism or some sort of lore in the game of Star Trek Online. The Constellation is going to be just 5 meters longer than the Constitution. But that means it's going to be just a bit harder to actually tell the difference is one really longer than the other. Also too, here's some tidbits about this vessel. The maximum warp for this vessel is actually warp 9, and that is the maximum it can actually really hit. And as of some technical database and of course appearing in Star Trek the Magazine Volume 3 Issue 9, it is stated that the ship itself had 15 decks, a crew complement of 535, and consisted of 8 vessels. These vessels did include the USS Gettysburg, Magellan, and the Valkyrie, as well as the Gillan. This does include the Constellation Hathaway Stargazer as well. But of course there was an NCC 1700, but I think that was more of a display prop for when they were making the display for Captain Picard's ready room. And again, if you really want to know how long in service this particular vessel was in, you have to understand this vessel has been active duty in Starfleet services from 2280s to 2370s. And of course, let's not forget some purposes. What is the mission statements for this vessel? This vessel's class's mission statements were long-range sensor analysis within threat territories, communications, intelligence gathering, deployment and retrieval of cargo and stealth shuttles, general science and patrol duties. So, there you go. This vessel was definitely a long-range multi-mission vessel, only meant for patrols and for analysis. So yes, in terms of Star Trek Online, this is actually more of a science cruiser for that sense. It can hold itself in a battle, in a good sense. But again, this definitely held out to be more of a support role in fleet engagements later on in Starfleet's career. So yes, there are other vessels that does the job better than this. Oh, and let's not forget the close-up zoom of the Hathaway's nacelles. You have to understand, these particular nacelles are indeed crucial to understand. Other than the actual Constitution's nacelles, these are actually thicker than the actual Constitutions. While the Constitutions were slimmer, these are slightly thicker. And their actual proportions is very much different from that of, say, the Constitution's nacelles. Though appropriate sized, it's just the effect. Thank you for watching today, and I hope you actually do enjoy this. As for some parting thoughts about the Constellation Class, it actually can be viable to actually have this in the game, depending on how many people actually do want this. I don't know, I probably would think that people want the ship in there because they want to have a console that will do the Picard maneuver. You know, going in, doing warp 1, zooming in at the enemy, do a photon torpedo barrage and a concentrated phaser beams at the target. Otherwise, there's really no reason for this vessel to be in the game, though it is a nice feel to be able to fly almost every single last starship in the Federation in the game. Even if it's just costume, people still like to actually fly around in it. Oh, and last bit of information. The reason why war is good for business. The reason why it's not in the game is because I do believe that they are actually making it possible so that you can actually get the accolade to unlock the skin for the heavy cruisers to get the Constellation Class. And that's what I'm thinking. I'm not really sure if they truly are going to do so. But, oh well, it's hard to say. Oh well. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. And let me know what you want to see next. You want to see another ship? Don't want to see another vessel? Want me to talk about something else? Be my guest. Leave a comment down below, and as always, thank you for watching, and have a nice time.